So if you haven't seen, I've been doing daily videos, well, semi-daily videos for the last few weeks of just what I'm working on, what I've been working on the previous day, what I'm going to work on the next day, as mainly a way just to keep my own thoughts organised and to keep myself on track and keep checking what I'm doing. Something I found useful at Stugan was a daily meeting of that kind. And like 90% of what's useful about it is just getting yourself to say that stuff. It's not so much what anyone says in response. And there have been a lot of them, and they weren't short. They were like, I think one of them was 20 minutes. And I have intentionally not made them public on this channel. They are public, but they're not public in YouTube terms. They are unlisted because I don't want to flood the channel because there's going to be loads of them, and they're also not that interesting. They're kind of like, they're not really meant for public consumption, but they do have to be public. I decided that they needed to be publicly visible, like anyone can find them. There needs to be a way for people to find them if they're looking. But I also didn't want to promote them in any way because I didn't actually want that many people to see them. Like, I need the idea would be about like 5 people seeing it, so that it's enough that I feel obliged to do it, but few enough that I don't really worry about whether they're any good. Because really, like, the only impediment to doing this, the only thing that's hard about it, like spending 5 to 10 minutes talking about what you're going to do is very easy. And as a time investment, it works out well because it ends up functioning like a kind of planning session. But the only thing that's hard about it is getting up every day and thinking like, oh god, do I look alright today? I'm really up for doing a video. And that gets easier if you think like, no one's going to see it, it's going to be like 10 people. And it was more than that, but it was few enough that there were almost no comments on it, and that's, if there are no comments, it's very easy to believe it was fine. Not that I ever get any negative comments really, it's miraculous. But that has been a chunk of work that I've now finished. If you did follow them, I hope it was clear that I wasn't intending for anyone to like follow all of them as a matter of course. But if you did watch like any percentage of them, then you will have seen that it was kind of all under the umbrella of making new ship generation algorithms to suit the new faction art, and also to put that new faction art in. So that previously there was only one type of ship really, and now there's 4. And each of them has a totally unique tile set. Each of them generates ships in a different shape and different way. And those two things have to mesh, and also the interior generation has to fit within that. And that was a tricky thing that took longer than I thought. A lot of the rest of it went faster than I thought, and in general it was just, you will have seen probably one video where I got pretty frustrated, and there were definitely like 2 or 3 days where things were just, standstill would be the wrong word. I was making progress, then having to wipe all the progress because it went so badly wrong. But other than that, it was pretty, went along at a fair clip. Like, I was just getting something major done every day. And as always, there's things you didn't consider, and there's things where you realise, oh, I've done that major thing, but actually there's this other part to it I haven't done. Or I've done it, but it needs fixing, and then the day of fixing turns out to be as much work as the original, getting it basically working day. But it's a nice milestone because it was one of the last, it's down on my to-do list as the last big system that isn't in there at all. There is still lots to do, and not optional work, like vital work has to be done. In particular, just sort of fixing the game, just making it all work together, and there'll be infinite problems caused by everything I've ever done, interacting with everything else. I've made it just the worst game for like finishing, because it just, everything affects everything else, and everything is constantly interfering with everything else. And I'm also hitting big performance problems that restrict how big a ship I can make, and that's the biggest problem with, yeah, it feels like one of the biggest things left to fix, because it's hard to know what a mission will feel like without knowing how big I can make them. The ones that run at an okay frame rate are of decent size. It's not a terrible thing if that's the biggest we can go, but I know I haven't optimised it well, and I want to get some help with that and figure out if we can go bigger. It's really just the kind of, it's not really, it doesn't affect how long the game is or anything because it's infinite, and each individual life is very flexible, but it will change the pace. It'll be a question of like whether each ship is a huge deal or whether the game is more about doing lots of little ships. And who knows which is better, but having the option of doing the big ships would be nice. There's then a lot of systems I just left like 80% finished or 90% finished, and the last 10% will be needs to go back in. It's very hard because you kind of like, you're simultaneously aware that yes, the last 10% of anything is the second 90%. It always takes much longer than you think, but at the same time, for that reason really, if you try and finish a feature completely before you move on from it, you just never get anywhere because the one feature will take so long, and then if the next thing you do invalidates what you did, then it was a huge waste of time. So you kind of have to do things roughly, and then you have to be left in the state that I'm in, which is where like everything's kind of theoretically in, but all of it has problems. All of it needs fixing. I feel pretty good about it. That was not a very positive statement, but I do feel good about it. I feel like when I go back to it, I feel ready to go back to it really. This was going to be, in my planning, it was like, this is what I've got to get done before December the 3rd. December the 3rd is the 3rd year anniversary of me starting on Heat Signature. It's not a full 3 years because I made whole other games in that time and I've worked on other stuff, but in calendar years it is that long since I started, and I thought by that point I need all the major systems in, and this was the last one of them. So in theory I'm sort of 2 weeks ahead of schedule because that's still 2 weeks away, and so I was thinking like, well, all I committed to doing was that. I could stop, I could have a break, but I don't really feel like it. I've had 2 days off and I'm kind of itching to get back to it. I want to just play the game, see what needs doing, what most stands out, and there's also kind of an opportunity coming up that would involve someone playing it without me being there on a stream, and the question of is it ready for that? Can it be ready for that? Is quite a big one. I fear it might not be doable to get it like totally ready for a newcomer to play, because that's a lot of work. I mean, tutorials, am I really? No, I'm not going to do a tutorial for it. But it's a question of like, does it all hang together? Does it crash? Does it? Are there things that are just totally broken unless you know exactly how to use them? That kind of stuff. Definitely, there's a load of stuff with the inventory screen that is not finalised. This is not good enough for a newcomer to play. But that might be relatively easy to fix. I don't know. I'm changing my name for that. I've been trying to think, like, it's not an inventory screen anymore. It's very much a kind of pause screen, but that also doesn't really cover it. And so now I'm calling it the what now screen, because it's like, it's both for planning ahead and it's also for improvising. It's for when your plan goes wrong and you're like, oh shit. So in either case, it's like, what now? Fuck, look through all the things I've got, look at all the enemies, take stock of everything that's going on, and react to it that way. Playing Dishonored 2 at the moment, a lot, which I love. And I also recently played Deus Ex Mankind Divided, and both those games are great, and both those games give you loads of cool tools. Like they check all the Deus Ex boxes, which is good because one of them is Deus Ex. And but neither of them is that good at letting you switch between stuff. Dishonored is better because it's kind of you hold down a button and select from a quick menu, but you can only really I don't know. Your method for doing that is not that slick and doesn't feel that good. It feels much more like it's supposed to assign all the things you really need to the in my case the D-pad because I'm using a controller, or on PC the number keys, and that's not really quite what I want. In Deus Ex Mankind Divided it's much worse. You can still assign things to the number keys, but I guess they both have roughly the same ways of selecting stuff, but you have all these you have like things you hold in your hand, you have moves you do by kind of pressing space or movement keys, and then you also have orgs, and then you have the melee attack, and those are all separate buttons. And I really just, in both cases, I just want like a thing that I press where everything stops and I see what my options are, and I can still see the game world, and I can still see what I'm doing, because those are the two ingredients to your plan. It's like, what situation am I in, and what options do I have? And in fact, yeah, there's almost three, because what situation am I in? What weapons and things do I have on me? What abilities do I have? And what is in the environment that I can interact with right now? So highlighting interactives, listing your inventory / abilities, and still showing the game world. Those are three different things, and None of those games do all of that at once, and so that's what the What Now screen is about. It's like, let's just put all of your options and your situation all in one place. When you pause, you can still see the whole situation. You see what you've got down the left-hand side, you see what you can do here at the right-hand side, like interact with, pick up that body, grab that gun, whatever. But it doesn't obscure any of the stuff that's going on in the centre, and you can still zoom in and out and move the camera around and see everything about what's going on. So I'm quite optimistic about how that's... I mean, it already works out great for me, but it needs tightening up for it to work for other people, but I'm pretty hopeful about how that will feel. And after that needs tightening up, that needs fixing. Then a whole load of bug type things, like effects for a lot of stuff. Like teleporters I think are okay, because even with no effects, it's clear what's going on. Grenades I think have to have some kind of placeholder effect at least to show that this is the blast radius, or like here's who it affected and why. It's very weird to have invisible grenades. And yeah, a couple of other things like that need fixing, and there'll be something to do with the unlocking system or the economy or things like that probably need tightening up, but I will just play the game and see what needs doing.